Babies, my babies, how are me, my babies? Uh, I guess welcome back and all that good stuff. Yalla. Uh, I met some people today that have a startup, and it's kind of within the field that I'm working in. And so my initial reaction was instantly research mode, and my secondary reaction was a bit of a panicky state. Then I stopped and I was like, I should be proud of them because they're actually approaching something and trying to do something. And maybe it's because I've been like kind of like focused on what will I code or kind of anxious because I'm waiting for the final design or something. So I had to like sit with myself because I was like writing some structural stuff for whatever I'm going to be like programming soon. And at that point, I kind of like got to realize how like my emotional train of thought was a bit immature. And I even for a moment there, like for a bit, started kind of like blaming myself for not finishing sooner or and all that stuff. But that's kind of like, I want to say, unjust to everything that I've been kind of like doing. And so I don't know. I feel like my feeling has been a bit more complacent lately, even though I've been actually like doing a lot more prep work around like what I'm trying to do. But while doing that, like the image in my head of what I wanted to kind of build grew a bit, which is bringing back the feeling of uncomfortableness of it actually like existing because like I'm not actually like building it, right? We're waiting for the UI UX design at the very least so we could understand how people kind of like move forward when it comes to like how I want to see what I want to actually build instead of just randomly building stuff and eventually kind of like not really going anywhere. But there's a website that I want to do tomorrow, and after I do the website tomorrow, I'm going to actually like go back to building my website and building certain structures, and then from there, kind of like when the design is done, then I'll be able to just like kind of implement it on whatever I have built and kind of like restructure things in a way that incorporate it instead of me just like standing and waiting in line. Um, that's basically my update. It was a beautiful weekend. I like went out of town, and it's funny because I went to an area where every like at least daily there's like some bombing somewhere, but it's targeting specific people, right? So like everyone's very casual about it. It's like they killed that guy, damn it. But they know who that guy is and what he does because like politically, a lot of people are actually like they're loud in the area, and so I'm talking about like my southern neighbors. I am Lebanon. My southern neighbors are basically like targeting specific people and killing them. That's stuff you don't see online or on any news, like, whatever. But anyway, so today's video is about code. Nice. Write code to solve a problem. What if the life we live in, is the way it is because of the problem hindering our vision? Write code to solve a problem. What if the life we live in is the way? What if the life we live in is the way it is because of problems hindering our visions? That actually makes a lot of sense, but I don't know why I connected it to code. So let's dissect my mood that day. I was probably kind of like being very impressionable on me being a programmer and me being like whatever it is I'm doing. So the concept of writing code is to solve a problem, right? It's basically a systematized approach where you kind of don't have to like repeat something. You just kind of like give a certain trigger and input and it moves. And I think I'm correlating it a bit with actual like with our day-to-day processes because like one way or another we find ourselves just like going through the mundane. We find ourselves going through the mundane. But the mundane for me, at the very least, kind of signifies a problem. Like, I am not doing something new. And in practicalities, from a design structure of your day, and I want you to consider this as a design structure of your day, because like all of us have like certain like patterns that we flow through in the day, whether it's waking up, whatever you do when you wake up, whether it's if you have a family, whatever you do before you leave the house, and whatever you do when you leave the house, if you're going to work, if you're going somewhere else, when you go to the gym. These are all like kind of like set patterns that we have. And whatever feeling we get out of them is based on the issues we're dealing with when it comes to them. And a certain resolution towards how we actually like how we handle them and how we handle those patterns today in order for tomorrow the patterns to kind of like look differently, feel differently, just be a bit different maybe. So maybe I'm trying to point that like life is actually coded through our behavior and through our habits. And in a way, every single time we actually try to, we find ourselves in a place where it's kind of like being repetitive. That gives us a bit of experience for us, or at the very least, it's being repetitive, not being repetitive. We notice it being repetitive because there's nothing interesting about it anymore. Or at the very least, yeah, there's nothing inspiring. Let's use the word kind of like inspiring that allows us to interact a certain kind of way with that that allows us to realize that our interaction with whatever it is that we're going through has changed because you didn't feel this way before. Now you're feeling it, and for me, anytime you're kind of like feeling like a certain kind of like mundaneness in any activity that you're doing, means that you've gotten to know it at a certain level and have reached a certain plateau. And I say that in the humblest way, simply because like if you talk to a personal trainer about like working out in the gym, they can talk about it probably for hours because like that's basically their day-to-day activity. But they have made that choice to like to go 8 hours every day as a work when it comes to the gym. But you go to the gym and then you kind of like realize that going to the gym for 1 hour after a couple of weeks, you're kind of like either doing the same exercises or you're exploring different things. So you're either always expanding, which means it's not mundane, it's interesting, but interesting means there's some effort towards it. Or mundane becomes creates resistance. And the idea behind it is to kind of like people I don't like to say dive deeper because like we don't really dive deeper into things, but what we do is we expand our scope of what we see around it. And that's my metaphor, like what you like your subconscious is basically a lake and you don't dive deeper into the things. When you find them, you bring them to the surface and eventually the whole lake is kind of like deep enough for you to always like be present when at a distance to catch the things that you want to catch or to re-grab the memories that you have or the experiences you have or the skills you have. You don't have to kind of like go through a lot of effort to like retrace where you're feeling from and what you're getting from. And I feel the same could be applied when it comes to like our day-to-day activities, but like internally is more like depth, right? But like bringing things to the surface. But externally, you're like seeing something in a shallow way to make it mundane. That means you're approaching it from a very limited scope. But if you take a step back, then you kind of see all the things that are like ingrained with it or that feed its existence. When I say feed its existence, like that support its existence, let's say support its existence. So that whole taking a step back, I would rather kind of like when I'm talking about scope, I'm talking three-dimensionally because I can see the things that are like kind of two-dimensionally supporting its existence. But the truth is, like, you don't really get to grasp their relevance because you're seeing them from the same angle. But if you change your level, or at the very least, when I kind of like when you float a bit into the sky, what effectively you do is you kind of like you get to see the connections simpler in a much more plane oriented three-dimensional way. And by doing that, that kind of like that bird's eye view is architecture. the bird's eye view is more is less structural and more architectural, then you kind of get to decide your approach. For example, going to the gym, you can use the machine in many ways, but each one is a different style of training. Then maybe you wanted to explore different styles, but you're still using the same machine. So like approaching our day, approaching life is kind of like similar. Because when things become mundane, then they're practically like being a bit repetitive, or at the very least, when it comes to like coding, that means you're retyping the same code in different places. But the whole essence of programming is to kind of like create code so you don't have to retype things. And then taking a bird's eye view allows you to kind of like recalibrate the architecture of what you're doing. And instead of writing the same code in different places, you kind of like create one file that has this code and you call for it different times, which makes it easier. And basically, that's the programming of an issue that you have. So the mundane, or at the very least, the problems that we get to see through life, are almost always kind of like they're either solved directly by rewiring our habits towards them, perception, and kind of like recalibrating how they fit with the scope of our vision. And even then, when they actually come back together, that means we kind of have to level up, or we have to like expand our view of what we're trying to do, and then from there, kind of like the problem is no longer a an issue that needs to be solved. It's just its repetitiveness is the problem right now. So basically, you're no longer changing the pattern, but you're designing how the patterns interact with each other. And it's a video.